my pleasure to be with the group today. And as Matt said, I have the sincere pleasure of serving as Deputy Commissioner of Higher Education. I'm responsible for the state's 2-year and community college education. We're very fortunate in the state. We have 10 comprehensive 2-year colleges, which includes 3 community college districts in the state. Each with a major focus on workforce development and doing what they can for their regional areas in providing access to education, workforce training, and opportunity. As Commissioner Busey mentioned, we're all about partnerships, and we have been focused, particularly over the last couple of years, in a number of very strong partnerships with the Montana Department of Labor and Industry and with Commissioner Busey and her team. And as she mentioned also, we're working very closely with the Office of Public Instruction and the K-12 sectors. Our ability to reach out and network and partner with business and industry is absolutely paramount to the work that we do. I think 2 significant achievements over the past couple of years have been the 2 very large U.S. Department of Labor grants, which Montana received, and Matt mentioned the grant that Matt is directing, the Rev Up grant, as he said, is a coalition of 13 2-year and tribal colleges in Montana. And then the second grant, Montana Healthcare, is a coalition of 15 colleges, with 2-year colleges and tribal colleges in the state. These 2 major grants right now have industry participation of over 150 business and industries which have stepped up to the table and said, we want to be a part of this, we want to be at the table, and we want to be working with the colleges in developing the curriculum. The areas of focus for these 2 major grants are advanced manufacturing and energy workforce development for the grant that Matt is directing, and the second one is focused on allied health and nursing, which that one is being administered under Missoula College. I think what's exciting, both of those grants are focused on not only reaching across the state and developing partnerships and really leveraging the strengths of our 2-year colleges, but they're also really leveraging the strength with the partnership with the Montana Department of Labor and Industry and our efforts to work together to expand apprenticeship training opportunities across the state. And I think over the last year in particular, we've made some just enormous progress in really bringing higher education and the Department of Labor together to really take a look at how are we doing apprenticeship programs, how can we do them differently, and how can we do them together, and particularly reaching out to areas for creating apprenticeship opportunities that are not already where apprenticeship opportunities currently don't exist, such as in healthcare, information technology, and manufacturing. So we have a lot of good stuff going on. I will mention that our 2-year colleges in the state have been very responsive over the past several years, and we have a 10-year student growth rate of about 78%, which is the highest of any of higher education and aspect of higher education in the state. So we're really proud of that, and we're also excited to work with Montana, the Governor's Office, and the Montana Department of Labor and Industry, and the work that Lindsay's doing with regional sector strategy partnerships. So, Matt, I'll pause there and, again, appreciate the opportunity to address the group today.
Awesome. John, thank you so much for being on the call as well. I hope that everyone on the call recognizes that we have two great champions in the public sector in both Pam and John. So thank you again for your involvement. I want to pass the floor quickly over to Katie Brooke, who we asked to learn a whole new webinar platform in the last 40 minutes. She's done a great job pulling that together. And Katie's going to run you through just a little bit of the logistics in terms of how to ask questions if you have them. Lindsay certainly has invited a lot of participation, so please feel free to interrupt, ask questions as we move forward. Katie, how do folks do that?
Okay, thanks, Matt. So there's a couple different ways that you can ask questions today. This is a really great platform. I'm excited we've been able to use it for today's presentation. If you look next to the right of your name, you will see a little hand icon, and that will allow you to raise your hand. And what that does is notifies the presenters that somebody has a question to ask. You can also ask if you want to get something to the whole group in the chat section. And then the Q&A section will allow you to ask specific questions to one of the presenters or to all of the presenters. So feel free to use any of those tools in order to communicate with us as we go along. Lindsay does definitely love it if you ask questions, and we will definitely make sure that we interrupt her if there's something that can help with the conversation. Please, if you are not speaking at a specific time, go ahead and mute your microphone. You can do that by clicking on the little microphone icon also to the right of your name. It's got a slash through it. When it's orange, that means it is muted. If it's gray, that means it is not muted. So please go ahead and do that so we don't get some of that feedback from people who are not presenting. Also, a recording of the presentations from Monday and from today will be available after we've concluded today. So, if you're interested in having those, I can get all those out to you. I think that is all on the housekeeping side, Matt.
All right, thanks a lot, Katie. Part of the reason we needed to switch platforms, we've had great participation in our calls. On Monday we had over 50 participants, and today we have about 45 folks on with us. So I think that's great in terms of these efforts moving forward. I want to pass the mic over to Lindsay now. Lindsay will do a better job of introducing herself than I will, but again, we're super pleased to have Lindsay as a part of this project, and I think you'll see her expertise shine through here fairly quickly. So, Lindsay, we'll pass it over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Matt. And thanks to everybody. I'm thrilled to be presenting this set of webinars. So for those of you who don't know, we had a webinar on Monday as well. This is the same webinar. We were just trying to give you more options for your scheduling. These webinars are being recorded, and so you will have access to the PowerPoint as well as to the recording if you would like to share. So let's jump right in. There's a lot of material in here, and I do tend to get a little carried away. So Katie and Matt are absolutely right when they say, please do raise your hand, interrupt, type a question in. They will be helping me to track those questions as they come in so that we can make sure we really get to them when you think of it. Or alternatively, write down your question, and we can hopefully leave some time at the end to get to all of the questions. So I am Lindsay Woolsey. I am president of the Woolsey Group, and the Woolsey Group is a national research and technical assistance firm. We live and breathe sector partnerships, and sector partnerships are called lots of different things all over the country. And so you may hear industry partnerships, you may hear skill panels, you may hear cluster of opportunity, you may hear skill alliance. There are many different names, but for a very similar model, which we will get into the nuts and bolts of today. And I will just remind everybody, if you can mute your line so we can reduce some of that background noise, that would be great.
Lindsay, this is Matt. If you're chatting right now, I'm not hearing you.
Technical difficulties with a capital T. I bought this in about 1992 or 93. It's still going strong.
So I think we're trying to get Lindsay back on, and we'll do so as soon as we can. Well, we're trying to get Lindsay back on. This is Matt again. Let me run you through, again, kind of what we're looking at in terms of next steps. And obviously, this is a little bit of the cart before the horse, but hopefully it'll make better use of your time.
Hi, can you hear me? This is Lindsay.
You're back on.
I am. I'm not sure what happened. I dialed back in to see if it would work. So you can hear me now?
We can hear you and see you. It's a vast improvement. All right, back to you.
So shall I continue?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm not sure where I got cut off, so I'm just going to dive into the definition here so that we're all on the same page. Here's what we're talking about. We are talking about at the regional labor market level, which can be defined in many different ways, a partnership of companies within one target industry or cluster that work closely with government, education and training, economic development, labor and community organizations. These partnerships focus on shared workforce and other competitiveness needs of their industry. And this last line is also important. These regional partnerships may or may not have support from the state or federal level. And the reason that's important is that if you know anything about the history of sector strategies across the country, we went through a period of time where we were quite flush with cash. And in fact, what ended up happening was we had sector initiatives that existed because of grants or money. And when we went through some dry spells shortly after, particularly in the workforce and education systems, what we saw were the drawing up of these sector partnerships. So fast forward to today, and what we realize is that these regional sector partnerships, when they are designed appropriately and when they truly are industry-driven and industry-led, they do not need a grant to start up. What they need is some dedicated staff from shared organizations to help support and partner with members of industry to implement and realize their opportunities and priorities and collective action. And so what we see is that where these sector partnerships get up and running, in fact, they then become magnets for investment as opposed to needing investment in order to get up and running. So this is a critical piece of the evolution of sector strategies that I always highlight, because the lesson here is these exist all over the country, thousands of different partnerships, and in many, many different industries, not because of money, but because of a need and a shared understanding of how to come together. So if we had just a snapshot, a picture of what this looks like, here's one version. It is a metaphorical table, if you will. Around that table, you have to have the strong voice of industry. And this means member companies from your target industry, whether it be manufacturing, healthcare, transportation, logistics, tourism, you name it. Those members of industry must be at that table as partners really helping to guide the agenda. Around the table, you also have a whole host of what I call strategic or support partners. These are non-employer partners. It is education, everything from K through 12 to your community and technical colleges and your universities. You want to include adult basic education in there. You want your workforce training. You want training that comes out of organized labor, including apprenticeships or other. You want human service organizations that can provide needed support to individual job seekers as they climb up through coursework and career pathways. You want community organizations who can help with those supports, with outreach, et cetera. So depending on your community and depending on your target industry, you will find that each of these individual support partners plays perhaps a slightly different role or a stronger, more emphasized role. Building a little bit more on some of my earlier comments about the evolution of sector strategies, here's another piece to consider. Sector strategies, as some of you may know, have been around for a long time. This is not a new initiative. It's not a new fad. It's not somebody's new idea. In fact, sector partnerships have existed for decades and probably longer. But they have undergone some very critical turning points. And in fact, I would say they've gone through some critical turning points even in the past 3 to 5 years. Traditionally, sector initiatives have focused almost exclusively on the entry-level, low-skilled worker needs of a particular industry. And as a result, we have developed some very strong industry-driven training programs that have a particular focus on entry and low-level skills. But over the years, what we've realized is that it is very difficult to get sustained employer engagement when you narrow the focus of your initiative so much. And so while we were best intentioned and doing very well and right by some of our job seekers in the community who fit the bill of low-skilled and low income, we were missing the boat in terms of truly getting out of a partnership with companies what we could. And so at the top of this tree, which I'm beginning to call the extended family tree of sector strategies, you will see where we are today, which is more broad-based sector or industry partnerships. These industry partnerships fundamentally rely on the premise that we are working with members of industry in a target industry, again, at the regional labor market level. We are asking them, well, what's going on in your industry? What are your big growth opportunities? And out of those growth opportunities, what would be some priorities for collective action? Collective action across industry and the public support partners that could come together to make those priorities a reality.
Lindsay, can I interrupt just for a second?
Absolutely. Yep.
So just to clarify, are some of the things that you see sometimes in the sector partner discussions, then do they focus on like legislative environments or kind of legal framework within an industry and barriers that might exist there? I mean, does it get kind of that far into other interests?
So that's a great question, and I will say that I've never worked with a sector partnership where, in fact, the top 3 priorities generally have to do with education and training. No surprises there, right? From there, generally, you'll start talking about costs of doing business, yes, but very quickly, because you have a group of companies in the same room who need to prioritize together, arguments around regulations, et cetera, tend to not make the top 3. You tend to instead see things like, how are we really making sure that we are realizing cost efficiency related to getting our products out? So that's a big one, for example. Transportation efficiency can be a very hot topic because you're talking, for example, to a group of small and medium-sized manufacturers who are all sending their same product out to the same transportation hub, but they're only filling their truck halfway. And so that will often be a priority over things like tax-related issues and regulations. But the other reason is that if you really understand that at the regional sector partnership level, there are certain things that you're going to be able to achieve and influence, and there are other things that you're not. very quickly the companies in that room get that we're going to have impact on helping our education and training programs shape their curriculum and credential to meet our needs better. We're going to have impact on figuring out how to realize transportation efficiencies together. We're going to have impact on mapping our supply chain in more effective ways so that we're drawing on suppliers in state, in country, as opposed to perhaps somewhere else that can be very expensive. And we may not have impact on changing federal legislation. And so it just becomes kind of a reality-based check. And when you have a group of companies in a room all discussing this together and saying, hey, how are we going to best use our time, they tend to be checks on which topics make the top cut.
That's
Does
awesome.
that answer your question?
Yeah,
okay,
that's great.
So in fact, and that's a perfect question, I mean, that is, so again, why we're seeing this evolution from just focusing on education and training all the way up to the broad-based sector partnership, because companies have lots of needs, right? They have more needs than just training, but they also have more needs than just trying to figure out regulations and navigating permitting. Very important. And so when you get them in a room, whether they're healthcare employers, manufacturers, whether they're energy related, whoever they might be, they are the ones that can really best understand what warrants our collective action together. So today's industry partnerships, just going along this theme of how have they changed over the years, they are absolutely driven. Can everybody still hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. They are employer-driven, they are regional. And this is really important because even in some of our more rural areas and rural states like Montana, what you will find is that manufacturing is still going to be very different from Bozeman to Kalispell, you can imagine. Healthcare is going to be different from a larger metro area, even like Helena or Missoula, as compared to maybe some of your more rural communities. And so it's very important to pay attention to the regional nature of your employers and your target industries and the culture of the unique regions. And that's why sector partnerships must be regional. Now, that does not mean that there's not statewide connections that can happen and statewide activity that can really leverage and help support what's going on at the regional sector partnership level. But sector partnerships themselves are regional. They are convened by a credible third party. This is a piece that I might have skipped over pretty quickly when I showed you the earlier graphic, so let me touch on this. By credible third party, here's what we mean. There are lots of organizations that can convene a good sector partnership, and it's the convening that involves the administrivia, if you will, of a good sector partnership, the setting the agenda, the finding the meeting space, the writing up the minutes, the keeping everybody on track, creating the action plan so that folks really remember, oh yeah, that's what we're talking about. And that takes a lot of work. There's some care and feeding that goes into a good sector partnership that you can't necessarily expect your industry partners to come with. And so a local workforce individual or organization, a community college, a chamber of commerce or another economic development organization, in some places community-based organizations like Goodwill or United Ways can be very, very effective conveners of a sector partnership. They have to be credible with the industry. They have to be credible with their support partners. And that is not necessarily everybody, right? There are some organizations that may not bring credibility with a particular industry. Perhaps another organization in a community brings more credibility. This is the type of conversation, honest conversation, that has to happen in a region or a community when deciding, are we setting up sector partnerships for our top critical industries? And if so, how? And how are we doing this together? Sector partnerships in the best cases act as a coordinating body then, and this is really, again, coming back to a good, credible convener, across the multiple education, workforce development, and economic development programs in a region. Previously, or traditionally, we have a picture of education trying to engage employers with the best intentions, We need input and advisory boards on our curriculum, on our credentials, et cetera. Incredibly important work. We have workforce organizations doing the same thing, trying to engage employers around what are your workforce needs, what more can we do. You have economic development, engaging with employers. What are your needs? What can we do? How can we help you stay here? How can we help you grow? And what ends up happening, again, even in small communities, is that oftentimes we're all doing this in silos individually. And we experience a couple of results. One is employer fatigue. Companies say, didn't I just talk to you last week? That wasn't you, that was somebody else. I'm confused. It's difficult to navigate as a company all of the different programs and resources, and it's difficult to commit time to each of them individually. Sector partnerships are a response to that, because sector partnerships become the single table at which employers can engage with all the public programs. They also become the single table at which the public programs can engage with an engaged and active and proactive group of manufacturers, for example, or energy-related companies, or healthcare. You get the picture. As a result of this, what you get out of sector partnerships are highly customized responses and highly accurate responses to what industry is naming as their top priorities. They are more about workforce than just workforce training, as I've mentioned before. They tackle other issues. This is important because that is, in fact, what we see as being most powerful in terms of, can we get sustained employer engagement? If they're about workforce and economic development and longer-term education strategies and not just one thing, employers tend to engage at a deeper level. You tend to get broader engagement across more employers, and you get that engagement for a sustained period of time. All of this relies on a sector partnership, the conveners and the support partners, treating those employers as partners and not just as customers, which is a traditional way of working with employers.
Lindsay, this is Matt. If I could just take a moment just to point out that our next step, again, we'll be trying to find those businesses and parties that are interested in helping convene sector partnerships in given regions, and over the next few months, identifying a time when we can begin to train those folks, and Lindsay will be a part of those efforts, MMSC will be a part of those efforts in terms of training people how to effectively lead those efforts and kind of what objectives to seek to obtain.
That's right, Matt, and I should have mentioned that earlier on. We will come back to this at the end, but these webinars are just the beginning. What we want these webinars to be is sort of a taste of what I call next generation sector partnerships or industry partnerships look and feel like. And what you will find, hopefully you're already finding it for those of you on the webinar, a lot of this looks familiar, and some of you are doing this, some of you are doing some of this, but there's probably an opportunity all across Montana to go to the next level of really organized industry partnerships. And so that's where we want to help. And so as Matt said, following these webinars, there's going to be a series of trainings and some pretty intensive outreach to communities across Montana, particularly in manufacturing and energy. And we will be working with these regions to really expand and build on what they already have going on, and in some cases to create new partnerships where there is nothing going on. So thank you for that reminder, Matt. So let me just jump to this, because this is one piece that I really want to reiterate. Sector partnerships are not any of these, and let me explain. It's difficult sometimes to imagine that a sector partnership is different from an industry association, for example, or an existing college advisory board or a career pathway employer group. Oftentimes, we also look at things like our state workforce investment boards. Because state workforce investment boards are driven by industry and they are at least 50% industry membership, this is similar with regional or city economic development boards, chambers of commerce, et cetera. And here's the difference. The top three here, your state workforce investment board, your economic development boards, or your chambers, they are what I call horizontal representations of industry. In other words, they have a mix of manufacturing, healthcare, transportation, logistics, tourism, technology, et cetera. And so they're incredibly important informants and advisors for certain initiatives and efforts that really draw on multiple industries. A sector partnership is one industry. And it's important that a sector partnership is one industry and within a like labor market region, because the companies in that sector partnership have to have a solid foundation of things that they can work on together that will improve the competitiveness of their industry. And when you broaden the scope of that too far in terms of types of industry or multiple industries, you tend to get a shallower cut of what we really could develop as shared projects. And then just very quickly, industry associations are incredibly important and useful, like all of these things on this slide. But they tend to be statewide. They tend to focus on things like legislative issues. Sometimes they focus on marketing and branding of a state or a region or an industry. And they don't necessarily get, again, to the depth of priority and specific projects that a community or a region could get to by focusing on just one target industry in that community or region. Lots of things that can be leveraged between sector partnerships, say in manufacturing, and an industry association that also represents manufacturing. So things to think about, and that's true for any industry. Community college advisory boards and career pathway employer groups, they are engaging a group of employers to ask them a very specific question, which is, please help us make sure our curriculum and credentials are accurate to your needs. That is incredibly important. What we find is that good sector partnerships, in fact, align with these, leverage these, and in fact even become sometimes the body or the group of employers that are tapped for those specific needs. But again, a sector partnership must be broader than just building a curriculum and approving a credential in order for employers to stay engaged over the long term and for them to really understand that if they come together regularly, they can tackle a lot of different issues together. And that's the beauty of a sector partnership. I'm going to zip through some of these slides, but I do want to just let you know and give you a sense that sector partnerships are, again, not just the latest thing. They are up and running in thousands of communities across the country and in many different industries, and at least half of the states across the country are finding some way to help create the right conditions for sector partnerships to thrive in their region. So it is fair to say that sector partnerships have far surpassed the tipping point of is this the way to organize ourselves across multiple programs and systems and organize ourselves to effectively engage industry? And the answer has really been a resounding yes. And you will see this in federal legislation, state legislation. You will see this in federal grants. You will see this in WIOA. You will see this in many different places now, and you will hear language resembling sector partnership language coming from multiple entities.
Lindsay, it sounds like a good time to be an industry expert in this arena.
It's a great time, yes, and in fact, my business is booming.
just as a quick reminder, for folks that are just on the phone, Lindsay's running through a number of slides right now that demonstrate kind of statewide sector strategy initiatives. And Lindsay, if you might just describe them a little bit as you go through quickly, that'll be great.
Perfect. Thanks for that reminder. I forgot that not everybody has the slides in front of them. So this next slide, again, I'll just be very quick, but this is a map that the state of Colorado has created, and I chose them, and there's a couple other slides in here too, of Arizona and Oregon. And I chose those three states because I think they best reflect what this could look like in Montana. No state is the same, you know, no sector partnership at the regional level is the same. But what you see here is a map of Colorado sector partnerships. And Colorado initially designated 14 economic regions across their state. And so that's what this map is. And then within each of those regions, they trained teams of education, workforce development, economic development, elected officials, and community organizations on the next generation sector partnership model. Out of that training then came agreement across all of those entities within each region of which industry really warrants our collective action in the form of a sector partnership. Fast forward 18 months and you see that there are over 24 sector partnerships across the state of Colorado. Everything from energy to tourism to health and wellness to advanced manufacturing to food and agriculture to technology, et cetera. And each of these partnerships are operating within a specific region. Now, note that the 14 economic regions that the state designated are not necessarily the exact geographic footprint for individual sector partnerships, but they were a starting place for conversations and joint decisions. And what we've found is that now sector partnerships are up and running sometimes in one of these regions, sometimes it's a corner of one region and a corner of another region. It just depends on the industry and their true labor market span. So it's important to remember that you must have some flexibility around how you define the geographic scope of a particular target industry in a particular area. Sector partnerships do not abide by county lines, city lines. They do not abide by community college districts or economic development areas. They abide by what the natural labor market region is of that industry. It's important, though, to also remember that you don't go too big, because if you go too big, the opportunity to really make sure companies can come together is hard. Was there a question?
The system, there's a way to do it, but I don't know.
I think we just have the background, but
we have somebody else asking for it right now.
Okay.
Trying to upload it for a state job.
Can you hear me?
yeah, Katie's going to take care of that.
Okay, so I'm going to keep going. I'm hoping folks can hear me.
Yes, ma'am, you're good to go.
Excellent. Okay, so what you have in front of you now is the map of Arizona. I'm not going to go into detail here, but suffice it to say, very similar to Colorado, they have 9 different regions in Arizona, and similarly, they have about 24 active or emerging sector partnerships, and with some kind of on the horizon in the next 6 months. They've done a terrific job of just really making sure that all of the community support partners are on the same page about what are our critical industries and how are we coming together to support them. If you had gone back 4 years in Arizona, what you would have found, just as one example, is if you'd gone to Yavapai County, you would have found a manufacturing effort being driven out of the Chamber of Commerce, a manufacturing effort being driven out of Yavapai Community College, a manufacturing effort being driven out of their local workforce organization, as well as a private manufacturing effort going on kind of in parallel to all of this. Today, what you find is those 4 efforts have aligned and come together. They didn't replace each other necessarily, because that's not the idea here, but they've aligned and they've come together under a big tent of Yavapai Advanced Manufacturing. They have had greater impact as a result. They share resources and can apply bigger resources to the types of priorities and solutions that they want, and it is a much more powerful organizing framework than their individual siloed efforts of 4 years ago.
You can. I don't care.
So Oregon, very similarly, they are just at the beginning of this process. They have done a really good inventory of what sector partnerships or sector-like partnerships exist in their various regions, and they have similarly brought community support partners together in each region and had conversations about which of our target industries really warrant our collective action, and they've now made decisions on which of those will be developed into robust, broad-based sector partnerships together. And so the map you see here is an example of that. So in Eastern Oregon, you'll see a very big swath of area. In far Eastern Oregon, they're going to be focusing on food chain. This is more like a cluster, and I encourage you not to get bogged down in the difference between sector and cluster, but it's fair to say that food chain cluster involves everything from agriculture to food processing and transportation and logistics. And that is an area of focus for them for a strong sector partnership, as well as healthcare, manufacturing, and forestry. Very different from Portland and Clackamas, who are focusing on metals manufacturing, transportation, logistics, information technology, and healthcare. Very different from their coast, where they're focusing on marine products and focusing on things like financial services. So you get the idea, hopefully. I will move on. I want to run through this very quickly and then get to some examples. And let me just back up a bit, and this next slide, for those of you on the phone, is a little bit about why sector partnerships, and there's 3 reasons why sector partnerships have really stuck over the years as a very effective organizing framework and a way to do business no matter where you sit and what type of system or program you're in. One, we still have a skills mismatch. As hard as we've worked, and for as many years as we've worked, you will find in almost every industry there is a mismatch, a gap. There is something going on with the folks that we are graduating and the folks that employers need to hire. This varies by industry, it varies by geography. And so that's why, again, sector partnerships really respect the very unique needs of a region and a particular industry in that region. We are also back in a very tight labor market economy, and this is very true for Montana. Incredibly low unemployment. And so what that means is that employers have to really make sure that they've got the right people in the right positions, and programs, education and training programs, have to really make sure that individuals have the very highly accurate set of skills and knowledge that they need to get hired if they are going to get an edge in a tight labor market. And so we see that sector partnerships can really help with that. It's important to remember that sector partnerships are not just about getting people jobs, if you're from the public program side. What they are about is making sure we are tightly aligning needs of workers and needs of companies so that we're paying attention to the right training at the right time and at the right level. And then finally, all of these challenges have to be addressed with fewer resources. And education in particular, as well as workforce training programs over the past 2 decades have seen steady disinvestment and decline. And that picture is not necessarily getting better. And so, as usual, we are being asked to do more with less. Traditionally, and here's a slide for those of you on the phone that says and shows that education traditionally, and this may not be true in Montana, but it is certainly true around the country, has been historically a train and pray institution or set of institutions. And what that means basically is we are responsible for getting folks into our programs and out. We want them to complete, and we want them to complete with a degree. But as you all know, the conversation has shifted quite dramatically to how do we also make sure that they are connecting to jobs in their economy so that degree actually has some currency in the local labor market. And so what we see now is education coming back very strongly to the concept of career pathways. But career pathways not just as an individual program inside of one institution, because traditionally that is where career pathway has been. And even today, in many educational institutions, it's what we see. We see a certified nursing assistant program that goes up to a registered nurse, but it is inside one college. What we know is that career pathways require a whole systems building approach. And so, in fact, we have to make sure that our high schools are connected with our adult basic education. We have to make sure that those are connected with our workforce training programs, our university programs, our community and technical college programs, and any labor and training that might be coming out of organized labor, apprenticeships, or other organizations. So it, in fact, takes a whole system that is connected in an industry-driven career pathway approach to really make sure that individuals can enter education and step out and get a job, enter back in and step out and get a higher level job, enter back in exit, et cetera, because this is the nature of learning and this is the nature of work in our economy. And it has been for many years, actually, right? And so in many ways, we're just catching up on what this means. But this is very hard work. And what we see is that all too often, community and technical colleges might sit on a similar board with their adult basic education or their K-12 districts, but they don't necessarily have a real project to work on together that would have them align, tweak, change curriculum, connect curriculum, figure out dual enrollment, figure out transfers, all of the nitty-gritty stuff that in fact is required to build a true career pathway system. So hold that in your brains for a minute while I jump completely to the other side, which is economic development. Economic development very historically around the country has been about business attraction. And this is very important. But what we're realizing is that good economic development agencies and organizations are now going back very powerfully to the concept of an industry cluster. And this is the concept that even in a global economy like we have today with lots of virtual connections and global connections, in fact, we still see that companies in a like industry cluster together. And they cluster together because they share things. They share markets and buyers, they share supply chains, they share infrastructure, they share innovation and technology, and they share labor, which is a really important one when it comes to sector partnerships. Because often, again, if you get employers together in a shared labor market region, our top priority is going to be, how do we stop stealing from each other in terms of skilled labor? How do we up the level of our entire skilled labor pool so that we can really stay competitive? And so finally, what we found is that workforce development also has a history. And that history is that they have historically focused almost exclusively on customized business training. It's the training for one company at a time. It's important. It will always be important. So don't take this message the wrong way. And they do job matching. Individual company A has 2 vacancies here. Let's see if we can find some individuals that fit and we can get people jobs and fill those needs. Again, an incredibly important function. But if we exclusively focus on that one-to-one business engagement, we've found in the workforce system that we burn through our resources very quickly. And so intersector partnerships, where we see a lot of workforce areas really evolving too. And what's important to understand, and again, for those of you on the phone, just a quick graphic of what the sector partnership looks like. It is employers and industry at that table really driving the agenda based on their priorities and needs, and it is a host of systems and programs sitting around, listening together to understand those needs, and then coming up with solutions together. And we find that in the best cases, because you've got multiple education and training programs sitting around that table, and because they are sitting around that table in a shared framework and context, that shared context being the target industry, they immediately start seeing projects and ways to work together. And if they stick with it, what they see is a very strong career pathway system that begins becoming apparent. It starts getting built in a very true way because, in fact, again, that industry voice is the pull and the precise projects that all of these entities need in order to actually work together and not just keep trying and talking about working together. And that might sound too crass, but it is historically true that there's a lot of rhetoric about aligning and working together. It's very difficult to do if you don't have a target industry framework to operate within. And that's what our sector partnerships offer.
For those of you on the phone, just imagine very nice looking sophisticated graphs that we can, and diagrams we can get out to you later if you're interested.
That's right. And Matt, how many people do we have on the phone compared to online? Do you know?
That's a fair question. Katie would have access to that exactly. We have about 46 people on overall, but I'm not sure of the breakdown.
Okay. I just wanted to.
We have 16 of those folks are on the phone.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. So for everybody, those looking at the slides, and for you 16 who can't see them, just very quickly, what do sector partnerships accomplish, right? So I've been talking a lot about what they are and what they look like and why and et cetera, et cetera. So what on earth do they do? Like I said, it is human capital issues, workforce and education issues that without a doubt are one of at least the top 3 priorities of industry groups when they get together. And I have never found this to be different. I just haven't. So maybe I just haven't run into the right.
Lindsay, I lost you again in terms of volume. Sorry, we'll try and get you back on here. Folks, Lindsay's going to call back in just a second. As I said before, too, we'd be happy to share these slides with you. Some of the things that are highlighted in the slides, not just are things that Lindsay talked about already, but also some of the other sector partnership case studies that she's been involved with before, and those certainly provide some interesting insights as well. So, again, if you're interested, we can get out. Great, thanks.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. That's hopefully we will make it through here. So, Matt, I'm not sure if you were you able to? Sorry, just pick up where I left off.
I don't have the capacity. No, I did share that there were some case studies that folks might be able to glean some more information on later in your presentation. Again, if they were interested, we would be happy to send these out.
Okay, great. So what I'll do is just zip to some of those, and just to wrap up my last comment, the types of education and training solutions are, they're endless. We see not only sort of the short and long-term training and apprenticeship, incumbent worker training, entry-level skills, career pathway. We also see some critical non-training issues that address workforce issues, like do we even have the right job description? And getting the right job description and understanding across multiple companies is a very quick way to open up bottlenecks in recruitment. And so you wouldn't be able to get to some of that if you didn't have multiple companies in one room. And so that's part of the point that I wanted to make with this slide, which is what do they accomplish around workforce issues? And it's education and training programs, as well as just the conversations that open up some of those bottlenecks. Sector partnerships are one of the only initiatives, by the way, where we have real results and evidence of their success. We see that results for employers who participate in sector partnerships are things like reductions in turnover, reductions in rework, reductions in customer complaints. We see things like out of the state of Pennsylvania, who at one time had over 80 industry partnerships, 84% of employers that participated in those industry partnerships reported increases in productivity as a result of participating in their industry partnership and participating in creating the solutions that came out of that partnership. On the worker side, workers and job seekers who go through education and training programs that come out of a good sector partnership are more likely to get jobs in the target sector. They earn more per hour. There are decreases in poverty, and they are more likely to work in jobs consistently and with higher wages and better benefits. These are results from control and non-control group studies, which is very, very powerful. Not often can we do that, but with sector strategies, we have had that opportunity. Across the country right now, lots of conversations about how to get even better around telling the story and measuring results of sector partnerships. That's certainly something that you in Montana will want to consider early on is what are the types of metrics and outcomes we're looking for here. So here are some case studies I wanted to share with you the Metro Denver Healthcare Partnership. One of the reasons is even in rural areas, this is applicable, even though this is a Denver example. Healthcare can be one of the most competitive industries, and so it's very hard sometimes to get clinics and hospital systems to come together, but it happens. And in fact, across the country, manufacturing and healthcare are two of the most popular types of sector partnerships in the country. And so this is an example of 7 major hospital systems in a metro area coming together with 8 different educational institutions, 4 economic development organizations, and 3 workforce organizations. That's a lot over a 4-county area. And again, may not feel applicable to Montana, but what's applicable about this is that the point is that no matter how many different organizations you have, you can come together when you have a target industry framework that can help pull you into alignment. And that's something to consider in rural areas or metro areas. I also wanted to use another example from Colorado, which is manufacturing. And this is focused on small and mid-sized manufacturers in the Fort Collins area. And the top priorities that they immediately came up with to work on together were, first, we need to network more together. So it has nothing to do with a training program or what can you do for me, community college or training program or economic development. They just knew that they needed to regularly come together and talk about some of their pre-competitive issues that would make them, in the end, all competitive. Some of those issues were immediately mapping their local supply chain. They didn't even know who was in their backyard that they might be able to draw on. Another piece was how do we change the perception of industry to young people and really make sure they understand the opportunities, the careers that are available right here at home. And that was a very powerful and immediate area where they could work on together. But on the long term, they had entered into a very in-depth, industry-driven process of identifying shared, most critical occupations, like that combined programmer machinist occupation that is kind of the kingpin occupation on the floor. If they don't perform well, nobody else can do their job well. Small and medium-sized manufacturers in northern Colorado recognize that we need to understand fully the new generation of skills that is required in that position so that our colleges can better teach to it. And what they realized is that existing credentials out of the national associations like NAM, et cetera, weren't cutting it. They weren't right. They just weren't teaching exactly the right skills. And so they took it upon themselves to figure out what are these exact skills that we need. Very quickly, from Washington State, a power generation skill panel sector partnership. This one was convened by Centralia Community College and included coal, hydro, and wind power plants, including some of the biggies like Grand Coulee Dam and Bonneville Dam. And one of their biggest things that came out was a significantly revised apprenticeship program, which has now been replicated in other places and in other states. And the point here is that if they hadn't had their education, workforce, and labor partners at the table with the industry, they would never have been able to punch through a lot of old pieces of an apprenticeship program that just weren't cutting it anymore. And so this is a very powerful example of an energy-related partnership. Similarly to that is a utilities partnership in a very rural area of Arizona on the border with Mexico. And this is a powerful example because this one, in fact, unusually, but it is possible, is convened by an employer. And I'll leave it there because I know we're out of time, but please do come back to some of these examples and take a look. So Matt, I'll turn it to you for any closing comments or big questions. There's a few more slides here, but I'll leave it to you to let me know where you want to take this.
Awesome. So thanks for that. That was obviously a lot of information. And again, apologies for some of our technology as we're figuring that out today. So I'd definitely like to see if there are questions from the group and see if we can answer those while Lindsay's on the line for everyone. Lindsay, maybe while we're waiting to see if there are some questions. And again, the best way to maybe indicate you have a question is to press the hand icon on your screen, or if you're on the phone, feel free to jump in when there's some time here. Lindsay, in one of the Colorado slides, there was a note about some of the surprises that businesses had as they joined sector partnerships and some of the things they got out of it that they didn't think they would. Can you talk a little bit to that?
Absolutely, and that's a great question, Matt, because so often I think we make assumptions about companies. Even though we're not companies, we make assumptions about them in terms of why would they engage? They're very busy. We want to be respectful of their time. Now, that is all true. They are the busiest people we know, right? That's why they run successful businesses. But some of the surprises that we hear companies say, specifically after engaging with a sector partnership, are, wow, I had absolutely no idea, first of all, that there were similar companies so close to me. I mean, a Kingman, Arizona example, another very rural example of manufacturing partnership. John Hanson, CEO of Laren Manufacturing, said to me, I had no idea that there were 300 small and mid-size, and emphasize small, manufacturers and shops in our Mojave and La Paz counties. And even knowing that, he said, made him realize there was a lot of reason to work together and come together and even start talking. The healthcare example in Metro Denver is a great one too, because they will say, we had no idea that we had so many shared problems. And we had no idea that we would have so many shared solutions, that we could in fact identify some of the pre-competitive or non-competitive issues. And I highlight that because if any of you out there are thinking employers aren't going to come together because they're competitors and they don't want to be in a room together and they might share proprietary information, remember, companies are not going to share proprietary information. Of course they're not going to do that, but they are going to very quickly understand what is a pre-competitive or non-competitive issue that they can develop a solution around and become more competitive overall as a result. So in some ways, we have to give them the floor and give them credit on just what they can come up with.
Thanks for that. Another question has come up in terms of a desire or someone viewing themselves as maybe a good convener. What's a good next step for those folks? And maybe I need to answer that.
Well, no, so here's the thing. I would hope that these webinars inspire a handful of you to actually say, hey, we have an opportunity to create a sector partnership in our community, in our region for X industry. And whoever you are, whether you're a college, whether you are MMEC, whether you are a workforce organization or a community-based organization or a chamber of commerce or an industry member yourself, it is incumbent on you to say, what do we already have going on? Find that out. Start asking questions if you don't know already. How can we build on that? If we don't have anything going on in an obviously critical industry in our region, how can I help catalyze the development of a good sector partnership? And your first step there, and in those situations actually, will be start talking to your community support partners and ask them, are you in? Does this make sense to you? Do we want more information? And this is where technical assistance going forward from our team can really help, because we will have the opportunity to work very specifically. There's a lot more I didn't get to here on that. We will have the opportunity specifically to work with the areas on this slide. And so for those of you on the phone, we are targeting certainly Bozeman, Central Montana, Northwest, and Billings for manufacturing and energy-related manufacturing. We also want to chat and work with Great Falls and Missoula, because we know you have some good stuff going on, and we'd love to help you kind of take that to the next level. But again, for everybody, please consider that potentially in your region, you can have a number of different sector partnerships. And I invite you to consider that a year from now or 2 years from now, you could have an industry partnership for each of your critical industries in your region. And even in rural areas, that's obviously going to be things like healthcare. It might be agriculture. It might be small manufacturing, but even in rural areas, you're going to find that you have 3 critical industries. So start figuring out who convenes, who supports, how do we make those decisions, and how do we start engaging employers in a real partnership.
Awesome. I think it's also well understood in Montana that our economic boundaries are sometimes all the way across the state as well, and we might see, even though there's a regional focus, folks coming in from fairly long distances to participate because they share those commonalities as well. So, Katie, do we have any other pressing questions from the group? We do not. All right. Well, great. So I would just like to thank everyone for being a part of the call. Again, great participation today from a number of folks, and also on Monday. We really look forward to digging a little bit deeper and finding that want to play a central role, and look forward to working further with Lindsay in the next 2 months and getting her to the state to give us some more training and input, and look forward to really launching some partnerships that hopefully will grow the industries and economies and businesses across the state. So thank you for your participation, Commissioner Busey, Deputy Commissioner Seck. Thank you also for being a part of this conversation and being champions in the public sector for business growth and economic development across the state as well. With that, I think we can depart. Thank you all.